When you're planning to do an all-night stakeout to look for evidence of demonic, ghostly behavior, you're probably wise to prepare a few pots of coffee. You don't want to be nodding off right when former occupants of the house decide to make their mean-spirited presence known. Of course, the product I'm 5 or 6 seconds away from promoting offers decaf and half-calf too, but obviously most Java sippers prefer to have some caffeine in their mug, especially in these circumstances. And that product is Sparkplug Coffee. They have the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in our home country of Canada. We Canucks get our orders within a week, and the shipping is free as a house-crashing bird. Of course, I guess those birds weren't free, since something possessed them to smack their heads into a house. Anyway, Americans will get what they order in a week too, although that free shipping thing doesn't apply to them. Stupid customs. Must be possessed. The Sparkplug customs are possessed. The Sparkplug people offer many blends and roasts and several seasonal blends. So if what you poured into your mug in March just isn't what you want in October, you can make some changes. Hey, how about taking out a membership? That'll get you all kinds of perks and deals that the casual customer won't get. Plus, members save money on every order. Go ahead and customize it too, so that you get your bag of beans when you need them. Then you won't just keep getting stuff dropped off on your front porch when maybe you don't need anything right now. So a Coffee of the Month club, this is not. When you're ready, go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES. Using our HYES promo code is going to save you 20% off your next order. And keeping money in your bank account is handy when you have 5 terrified kids to feed and a handful of jerky specters moping around, breaking stuff and freaking everybody out. Okay, so you're going to get your spark plug on, but it's time to get your scare on, as we ramble on about a horror movie that made the lady opposite me scream several times. Andrew Luther, we asked you to get creative on your keyboard again and write a creepy adaptation of our theme music for the month. So let's hear it.
And action!
Have you ever seen The Conjuring? Hello, movie fans, and welcome to our 8th annual Scary Movie Month. We cover classic movies on this channel every Monday, not to mention every other Friday, and we spoil them. Today's episode is our 539th, so we thank you for your download, your stream, or your YouTubeation of our gab about another James Wan horror show. We covered his movie Saw a few years ago. Now it's the movie that sounds like a magic trick. I'm the matter-of-fact demonologist who put a very weak lock on his forbidden closet of mystery, Ryan Ellis. What is it with you and my forbidden closet of mystery? And here's the lovely lady who doesn't bruise easily, nor does she have clairvoyance. Or do you? My wife, Bev.
That's me.
Clairvoyance?
Well, if I was clairvoyant, I'd know how you were expecting me to respond to that.
That's a good point. I mentioned this is Scary Movie Month. Well, you'll be getting 7 reviews of horror movies on this channel in October. In a way, it's more than that, because a couple of the solo shows I'll be doing will discuss many films in a franchise. But as for today's chat, it's The Conjuring, and the coming attractions trivia for that. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga have been in many successful movies and have also worked together several times. Obviously the various Conjuring movies and some of the spin-offs, but also the Liam Neeson thriller The Commuter. I'm not the biggest Wilson fan, we've discussed that before, but even I can't deny that he's been in a lot of good things. So has Farmiga. Yeah, we've only covered one movie for each of them before now. Name those films for those people, one each.
So with Farmiga, I remembered right away that it was The Departed. We covered The Departed. But with Patrick Wilson, I had to look it up. And I remember you said I would kick myself when I saw it, and I did. It was Young Adult, a movie I absolutely love. I'm also not the biggest Patrick Wilson fan, but I will say he is a very good actor. And he's never been better cast than he was in Young Adult, where he's just supposed to be a handsome drip. He's a good actor, but there's nothing there. I don't know. He just doesn't have the charisma to be a movie star. He's very handsome, but what am I watching? He has the charisma of skim milk.
He's the opposite of Sharon Stone and Angelina Jolie. He's got a great agent.
Does he?
I don't think they do, but he does.
When I was trying to figure out what the movie was that we had covered and I was looking his filmography, he's made his share of Drek as well.
Well, everyone does, but it's just surprising to see the movies he's been in. A lot of them for one. He was in Aquaman. He was in Insidious. He's the lead guy in that. The father. I guess he's a father in this, but he's not the father. That's Ron Livingston. And he was in, I think, at least one other one. And then some of these spin-offs that Wan didn't direct, although he did the second one, I believe. He's a Wan regular, and that guy makes hit after hit after hit. He was in Watchmen. I like the Watchmen movie a lot. We're talking about Wilson now, not Wan. I could keep going on here, but I don't get it because he's not very good. One more thing about these two actors, by the way, who play husband and wife in so many Conjuring spin-off, or I guess they call it the Conjuring universe on Rotten Tomatoes and so on.
The Conjureverse?
No, it says Conjuring Universe, but yes, the
Okay.
Conjureverse. Both of them were involved in love triangles in those movies, Young Adult and The Departed.
He's not really part of a love triangle because at no point is he
It's
aware.
not his choice.
He's in this love triangle.
Charlize Theron thinks there's one there, and she's going to make it a love duo with her and him again. Okay, The Warren Files, the original title of this movie. What a spectacular, marketable title that is. I don't love The Conjuring, but The Warren Files, that's their name, of course. Their
It's
last
like the
name.
X-Files. I think that's what they were trying to...
Okay. It was released by New Line a decade ago on July 19th, 2013. It cost only about 20 million greenbacks to make, then doubled that total over the opening weekend alone when it was number one, and went on to pull in over $320 million at the worldwide box office. No wonder the studio keeps making sequels and spin-offs. This is the MCU of horror franchises.
I'm quite new to this series. I've just never paid it any mind whatsoever until you suggested we do it for...
Is this your first ever movie in this? It must be, right?
I've never seen any of the movies. I'm about as aware of what goes on in them as I am aware of what happens in the NFL, which is to say, not at all. But do you think that when they created this film, they purposely wrote it to make sequels really easy to write? Because the whole Annabelle prologue, which has no bearing, really, on the rest of the movie, but then they come back to it where she goes into the Cabinet of Curiosities.
The
and
kid
doll.
does. Their kid
yeah,
does.
Yeah, and the doll has moved, but this doll's really creepy. We're not going to talk about her in this movie, but stay
Annabelle
tuned.
is the next movie they made. It was before The Conjuring 2.
Right, so do you think that when they wrote this movie...
Probably.
I mean, Juan was coming from the Saw franchise.
This is a softball, Bev. Everything they write these days is a setup for a sequel.
And Juan, how much money did he make off of all those Saw movies? He was the director of the first Saw movie,
But
right?
none of the other ones, though.
And none of the other ones, but I'm sure he got paid every
Probably.
time they made another Saw movie. And even wanting to call it the Warren Files, implying files. There's going to be multiple movies, all these interesting stories that we can draw
Look
from
at the
this
setup at the
couple.
end. They're going to go investigate the Amityville horror.
Have we mentioned yet that they're a real
Yeah, it's based on a real
couple?
story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lorraine was still alive when the movie was made, but Ed had died 6 or 7 years
Yeah, I
before.
looked up some interviews with her. There's some stuff of her on YouTube.
Yeah, Farmiga is Lorraine and Patrick Wilson's Ed. But Bev, this flick is a little over 10 years old, so you should probably remind us what happens in this based on true event story. Give us a skinny on The Conjuring.
All right. Carolyn and Roger Perrin and their 5 daughters have just moved into an old house in the country where mysterious and nefarious things keep happening. So they reach out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned demonologists, to help them get to the bottom of the strange phenomena terrorizing their family. The Warrens' research and Lorraine's clairvoyance reveal a malevolent spirit named Bathsheba, who wants to possess Carolyn and force her to kill her own children. When Bathsheba gets dangerously close to succeeding, Ed must man up and perform an unsanctioned exorcism to save the family and condemn the demon back to hell, or a music box.
Which does spark up music on its own at the very end, suggesting this isn't over.
This ain't over.
This
Stay tuned.
is over.
To be continued.
A lot of movies that I'm talking about this month by myself or with you do have endings that suggest that. Even the ones that maybe didn't know they were doing another sequel. You know what? They did know they were making a sequel to this because they started preparing it before this even came out. They greenlit part 2 in June, and this came out in July.
They must have known this was going to be a hit.
Annabelle was 2014. Conjuring 2 was 2016. Annabelle Creation was 2017. The Nun 2018. So it was almost every year that they've made some kind of spin-off or sequel. They made 2 in 2019. Or, in a nutshell, former homeowner convinces mother of 5 to cut that number down by 1 or 2.
How many bedrooms in this house? Come on, let's talk turkey.
You don't want all these kids. Why do we have all these kids, Mary? This drafty old barn. Your favorite line in It's a Wonderful Life. Although he loves the youngest kid in that movie, Zuzu, more than the other ones. I guess Tommy and maybe Jamie.
Yeah. They were the first pancakes. Get them out of here.
Let's talk some turkey and numbers and such on The Conjuring. The Rotten Tomatoes numbers are fantastic. 86% of critics like this film. 8-6. The average is 7.2 out of 10, and there are 229 reviews on the site, and 83% of audiences. The Conjuring 2's Rotten Tomatoes numbers are almost as good. 80% for the critics, not that far off of this one. Although the rest of the franchise was mostly trashed on Rotten Tomatoes. The Nun movies and The Curse of La Llorona, however you say that. Except for a couple of the Annabelle spin-offs. They at least got fresh tomatoes. Not by much, but they did. This was 19th at the 2013 U.S. box office. Gravity was 6th. We covered that for the Now Playing Project many years ago. A little brief review. Wolf of Wall Street, we did that for that series then too, but also redid it this year. It was 28th. And 12 Years a Slave was also a Now Playing Project podcast, and a podcast we did this year, more full-length podcast. It was 62nd, and it was the Best Picture winner Oscar. This didn't get any Oscar nominations or wins, but it won some Fangoria awards, including for Lili Taylor, who's very good in this movie, and the Saturn Award went to it for Best Horror Film. By the way, The Nun 2 spent many days at #1 back in the middle of September. We're recording this around the time that's happening, but the thing goes up on the 2nd. So anyway, it was #1 for 2 weekends in a row. Yeah, it's September, but still. So we're almost timely by talking today about the one that started it all. It wasn't really intended. I didn't know Nun 2 was coming out in September, but what do you know? So what did Bev think of The Conjuring?
This is very watchable, really fun, and legitimately scary horror movie. Like you said, the scares worked so well on me, and you were there. I actually screamed several times. Mm-hmm. Great performances, but honestly, it's just so deft at building tension and terrorizing its audience. Really had a great time watching this movie. My main complaint would be there was a missed opportunity to plumb some of the drama of a mother forced to hurt her own child, the tension between the Warrens and the church, the economic tension of the Perron family who's financially stuck in this home that's trying to kill them. But this is not that movie. This is just a fun ghost story, and it's so fun, incredibly successful.
It's about 1 hour and 50 minutes long. The sequel is 2 hours and 14 minutes.
Come on.
So I've got that coming to us from the library. We'll probably watch it. We'll watch it before we post this podcast. So if there's anything relevant to say, maybe I'll make a little note on the upload when this goes online. They've got a couple of villains, including the nun. That's where she makes her debut, is that movie, I believe. Or it's when she becomes a major character, at least. The one that's had 2 or even 3, I guess 2 movies about her. Anyway, the point being that there are all those depths they didn't plumb. But there's 2 things I could say about that. One is, the movie's over, go home. When we did The Fly, we talked about how it starts out that Gina Davis goes to his lab and sees those telepods about 5 minutes in the movie. It's not 15 minutes like a lot of movies would be now. There's not a long conversation. And when, spoiler alert, at the end, she blows the fly's head off, cries, drops a shotgun. Movie's over.
Yeah,
there's nothing else to show. Yeah. Cronenberg knew when to get in and when to get out. You could say that's the same about this, too, because for the Perron family, there's no real coda. The coda is for the Warrens, setting up Annabelle and I guess other sequels as well. I don't know if we ever even see or hear about the Perrons again. They maybe mention them in the other movies. I've only ever seen everyone except for Nun 2, once each. Most of them aren't very good. But it's good they don't dwell on things you don't need to dwell on. Maybe in Conjuring 2, being that long, they did.
I would say there's some shagginess, especially in the third act, with the whole back and forth. Is the family in the motel? Can the demon access Lorraine's and Ed's daughter?
Yeah, how did that happen exactly?
Like all these little asides that start happening in the second half of the movie. I don't know that they add that much. There's some good creepy scenes and some decent scares and stuff. But I would have rather have taken that time and that effort to tell a more elegant story of what's really happening in this family. And I was thinking about some of my favorite horror movies, but especially some of my favorite horror movies from the past decade really do plumb exactly those depths of a parent forced to hurt their child.
Hereditary.
Babadook, a great example. You even said when we were watching this that actually shares a lot of things with the Babadook, because you have a woman who becomes possessed to hurt her own child. Hereditary, woman possessed to hurt her own child. The Shining, my all-time favorite movie. A father possessed to hurt his own child. Yeah. It's like a theme that horror movies come back to over and over again, not just because it's most people's worst nightmare that they would hurt their own child, but also because I think inside each of us, deep, dark down there, every so often...
You want to get rid of 1 or 2 of them?
I mean, we don't have any children.
We got 5.
I think the Babadook does this better than anybody.
We could lay some of them off. We need cutbacks.
It'd have to be the youngest. They're unionized. Last in, first in.
The others have seniority. Well, as for the scares in this movie, they're obviously very effective. This got an R rating despite no nudity, no bad language, not much blood. There's not really that much violence per se. But apparently the ratings board said, because you say, well, what can we do to change our movie? And they're not supposed to tell them because they're not a censor board, which is crap. Of course they're a censor board. But anyway, they're not supposed to tell them specifically what to change. It's not one thing that's the end of the world. Maybe they have sometimes with other filmmakers. But anyway, they told James Wan in the studio, we think your movie's just so scary in general that kids shouldn't be allowed to try to see it. Which Wan should have loved to hear, because that is one great compliment. A movie that's this effective. The music works so well. Joseph Bishara doing that. The patience of the scares. The girl looks under the bed and nothing is there. So many movies have had that. Or the other thing would be, and it's great in Poltergeist, we covered that last fall, where he looks under the bed, Robbie does, but then when he comes back up, the clown is on the bed, which is a great tactic too. That was fairly new, probably in 82, to do that. But that's been done 1,000 times, just as the thing under the bed's been done 1,000 times. So the thing under the bed is over here rather than there. But that doesn't really pay off. Instead, it's when there's something over by the door and it's looking at us. We can't see it. The other sister can't see it. But the one who's been terrorized and having her foot grabbed several times can see. Maybe it's supposed to be Bathsheba. I don't know. But that is impressive that this movie got that kind of rating, considering it doesn't cross the lines that usually get you an R rating. And a big factor, too, I said the music and the patience, but also the loud noises and the closed doors. A closed door is one of the most effective horror things in any movie you'll ever have. I think they said that in the Silence of the Lambs commentary when Clarice is going down in the basement at the end of that film. What is she going to find? We know actually more about what's down there than she does. But I've always remembered that, thinking a closed door is, yes, a great tactic. And then the loud noises. Sometimes that can be such a cheap tactic in movies, and that does happen in this movie sometimes where it feels a little cheap. But generally speaking, loud banging on a closed door is one of the better scares you can have, because what is making that noise?
A loud knock on a door? Yeah, that scares the bejesus out of me.
And our sound system isn't even that good. We don't have full surround sound. We have a sound bar that simulates it.
It's not just relying on jump scares. The technique he uses, and I couldn't break down exactly everything he does to really get under our skin and terrify us.
I think I just did it. The patience, the music,
the patience
the loudness.
is a big part. The pacing, great casting in this movie. The kids, particularly a very young Joey King, she is so convincing with the tears and the fear. The kids do a great job of selling it. What is the phrase? The best special effects is a good actor. Mm. But mostly it's that slow build. I know that some people have complained about it. I guess people are used to, kids these days, are accustomed to movies having a faster pace. But the faster paced horror movies just aren't as scary. The build-up is what makes the release so powerful. Mm. Every time I screamed watching this movie, the very next thing I did, well, I swore. But I laughed, right?
Yeah.
You laughed.
I laughed at you.
Of course you did. Rightfully so. I'm an absolute mess. That's why people like watching horror movies. They know it's pretend and it's thrilling and it's fun.
In the theater, they would have screamed and they also would have laughed, guaranteed.
Oh, what a great theater movie this must have been. I totally wish I could go back and watch this in a theater with a crowd and scream and be a big dumb idiot about it.
I will admit this movie worked on me. My measure has always been, how does it affect me later that night, especially when you've gone to bed, or back in the day before I knew you, when I was just home alone at midnight or whatever time I'd go to bed. It's dark and it's quiet. I live in a condo, so, and here in this house too, part of what works in a movie like this is they're set off mostly alone. They're not really, truly alone, like in The Strangers, for example, that horror movie from a few years before this, where people could really screw with them and no one would ever really hear it. But they're far enough away from everybody. That's part of why these demons can screw with people, because no one hears it. If that happened in our house, we've got neighbors on both sides, especially the one that's attached to us, that would hear that. If there's loud enough screaming from either people or demons, they'd report it. So it's harder to be scared when you live in a condo like I did for many years, or the houses we've lived in where we are pretty close to other people. But if you live in the country, it would be even that much more effective. This movie played tricks on me, which it's supposed to. Our basement is not creepy or weird at all. It's wide open. If anybody was ever down there, a person or a demon, there's no demons, I don't think. But then again, I said to you when the movie was over, I think it's possible this stuff is more real than a lot of things. I think alien landings in reality are also possible, but not likely that they could come here in a spaceship and then stick things up our bum. That doesn't seem likely to me. But the afterlife in that kind of way, I don't really believe in it, but I also think it's somewhat possible. I think it's also more likely that they might be standing right beside us, but they're not corporeal. They can't do anything about it. They might be screaming in my ear right now, but I'll never know it. The composer, Joseph Bashara, plays Bathsheba and also played the lipstick demon in Insidious. We're probably going to watch that too sometime in October. That might really mess you up.
Oh, God. Also
a good example of a movie that has a lot of long build and some incredible moments. There's at least 3 at that number, maybe 5 or 10. I don't remember exactly. But when Bathsheba's on top of the armoire, I knew it was coming. But when she jumps down on the girl, that was one of your scream moments, and that stayed with me.
Of my big scream moments, that was the one that I got over the quickest. The clapping is the one that absolutely, I thought I was going to die.
Because that was in the trailer, and I mentioned that to you during the screening. I thought you would have remembered that. It was 10 years ago. Lili Taylor at the top of the stairs saying whatever she's saying, and then from behind. You see the hands come out of the darkness, too, so it's doubly effective. When
it comes to, like, popcorn horror movies, they're so out of my realm. I don't pay attention to them. I generally don't like them. I don't like the slasher movies. I like my horror movies really arty and super bleak and dark. I always say to you, like, I'll suggest a movie. You'll be like, what's it about? I don't know anything about it. I'll just say, it's an A24 horror movie. And you're like, oh, okay, let's watch it. But generally, these kinds of movies are just not my cup of tea. So I never watched the trailers. Maybe I saw the monster toys on TV and just wasn't really paying attention.
And it was a decade ago, too.
Yeah. So those scares were super effective on me. I'm, like, thrilled to be discovering this movie now. I really did enjoy it. It reminded me a lot also of Haunting of Hill House. Very same style of that slow build and those great scares. That show was better than this movie. That's a show that actually did plumb the depths.
Yeah.
That actually was interested in the underneath emotional threads that were creating the horror along with the actual ghosts. And it was a beautiful show, really well done.
With some tremendous scares, though, too.
So I think when I watch The Conjuring, I'm like, oh, you're so close. It's all right there. There's so many things that you could do. But you were just more interested, I guess, in the action at the end. Which, in fairness, who's their audience? It's teens. They don't give a damn. This is who's going out and seeing this movie over and over. That's how it made over $300 million. They can make the movies for the teens, and they can enjoy it. And I'm not going to complain about that.
When you get to possession at the end, maybe 20 or 30 minutes left in the movie when Lili Taylor is possessed, very similar to the way they do it in The Babadook, which came a year later. So this couldn't rip that off, and I'm sure other movies have done it anyway, where something is spilled into someone's mouth. The Evil Dead movies have done that, actually, where someone who's possessed would be on top of you and go, blah! That's one way they possess you in the Evil Dead films. That's what happens in this one. Lili Taylor, who doesn't show it either. I'm fine. Yeah, I was all freaked out before, but I'm okay. I'm cool. But it's not like the possessed Carolyn seems to be aware that she's possessed all the time. And it's not for that much of the movie that she is possessed either. I like, too, that we don't see her take the two daughters. She takes Christine and April back to the house. Not even the two youngest. April is, but Christine's not. She's the third, middle child, I guess, of the five. And she's the one that she's going to try to kill right up the very last second until Lorraine interjects by, that great memory, fight. You want the family that you had in the beach, not the daughter you're going to stab with scissors right now. That whole sequence does pay off big time. It's almost like Jaws, where you don't see the shark for over an hour. You do a little bit, I guess, here and there, but for the most part, not until well over an hour into the film. But then at the end, you see the shark plenty, usually in flashes, but there's all kinds of action, and it is a slow build that gets to that point. Well, The Conjuring's the same thing. We see plenty of things, and there are big moments. Bathsheba jumping off the armoire is a huge one. The clapping at the top of the stairs with Lili Taylor. But in the last, say, 10 minutes or so, there are all kinds of crazy things going on because she's now full-on possessed by this Bathsheba demon.
All horror movies have this moment where they turn from the creepy horrorness to almost like an action film. You have to if you want a big climactic moment.
You could ask, too, why they do it in movies like this. So many of them have been like this, where it's the slow build. Why is the demon or the ghost or the thing that's messing with you from the afterlife or wherever they're from knocking on doors, knocking off your photos from the hallway, and then giggling about it, which I didn't notice the first time. You said, oh, you hear a giggling. So I rewound the movie on Netflix, and then you could hear, I don't know why I missed it the first time, you hear the kid, because he's just a more poltergeist, meaning a playful spirit, a mischievous spirit. It's Bathsheba who's the true demon, and then other ones we see the maid who killed herself, or the nurse, who slashed her own wrists. She made me do it. And the mother who killed her own kid that's in the basement. That was another great jump scare, because first when you see her, it's not so much a jump scare. She's in the background when we see Lorraine in the basement, but then Lorraine's got the music box, pulls it down, and the face is right in front of her.
Such a great misdirect, because you're looking in the mirror of the music box, expecting to see something scary, expecting, and then where you least expect it.
Right in front of her.
Yeah.
I didn't read the review, but somebody on Wikipedia, the review was synopsized in about a sentence or two. Maybe an Andrew O'Hare from Salon. This person was bothered that the whole thing about witches were trying to kill children hundreds of years ago, and then innocent women were killed, and that's what this storyline is going for. But it is a horror movie. Yes, it's based on reality, but it doesn't have to be that it's actually now saying, but you know what? Those witches that were killed back in those days in Salem, they should have been killed. There is a possibility that there was at least one person, and this Bathsheba person, although apparently in reality she was exonerated and died of natural causes. But there's nothing to say that there couldn't be somebody who's a devil worshiper, because anybody could be. It's like being somebody who worships God. The Pope could think they're talking to God all the time. This guy, I speak to God. You're not speaking to anybody, I don't think, in the first place, or to Satan. But if you want to believe these things, and if it is even possible at all that these two beings can respond, then Bathsheba was talking to Satan.
There are certain people in the world right now that have just made careers out of accusing everybody left and right of being a pedophile or a groomer. And And that doesn't mean that real pedophiles and groomers don't exist. And it's the same with the witch hunts. Not to say that there wasn't somebody with bad intentions who made consorts with the devil and was actually trying to do Satan's bidding and was hurting people. Just because a lot of people were falsely accused of being witches doesn't mean there wasn't somebody out there somewhere who was doing what they thought those witches were doing. At least trying to, because I don't believe in the devil.
I don't either. I'm just leaving it open. That's why I'm agnostic and not an atheist.
I'm an atheist. I'm less fun.
So yeah, she killed herself at 3:07, hung herself in the tree, and that's why the clock stopped so often at 3:07. Although when Drew and Brad are there, Brad! One of my favorite laughs with you has got to be Lost in America at the end when Albert Brooks comes to New York, goes to New York and says, Brad!
The credits roll.
Yeah, exactly. I was kidding! Anyway, off topic. So Drew and Brad are helping out now. And they set up clocks, and they don't stop at 3:07. And it's the next morning when we have this perfect moment where everybody's serene and happy, and let's have breakfast together, and Ed is fixing the Chevy, Lorraine's doing laundry. But of course, it's not really over. And I think I said that to you as well, that, no, everything's fine. Don't ignore the counter with 25 or 30 minutes left in the movie. Clearly, everything's fine now. The clock's not stopping. Is that maybe Bathsheba just screwing with them?
Well, they do explain it, because you say, why would a poltergeist do all these weird random things? Why are they opening cupboard doors and knocking pictures off?
If I didn't finish that point, it's obviously to build up tension for the movie, but you could even argue that within the logic of demons and ghosts is that the more you do this, the more you make people believe. If somebody hears loud banging and just goes, oh, shut up, ghost, or doesn't hear it, or can't see you, or can't visualize you, like the scene where there's somebody standing behind the door. The other sister doesn't see that at that point. Maybe she does later on. So if nobody believes in this, or they just slough it off, then these beings don't get their power. They're like Trump. They need people to believe to gain power.
They're Tinkerbell, actually.
Yeah, and they play off also the fear. They feed off fear, which is also what happens in It.
But they do literally explain it in this movie.
Okay.
Lorraine says they are trying to weaken Carolyn. Bathsheba wants to possess Carolyn, but it's hard to possess somebody, so you have to kind of break them down. You mess with their sleep, you make them scared and stressed all the time, you put their children in danger, you kill their dog, you do all these weird things with
They
their
killed
house.
the dog!
They killed the dog! I think I said right away, that dog's dead for sure. Because in horror movies, they really do kill the dog, because that's how you ramp up the stakes. Oh, and they kill the dog right away. Yeah. They don't waste any time.
But I forgot. I thought maybe they didn't, because in modern movies, it's a lot less likely you're going to kill the animal, especially the dog.
Well, because the audience turns on you.
But they do in this movie, even though it's a modern film, the last 10 years, and also the movie I'm covering next week, which is not a modern movie, it's 45 years old, a dog is killed in that too. It's Halloween, I'm talking about, the original Halloween.
So the point is that Bathsheba's trying to wear Carolyn down to the point where she's just so frazzled and such a mess that it becomes easier to possess her.
I guess you could argue that if they did just do what Eddie Murphy says about horror movies, that was in his stand-up act back in the 80s, just get out. This is an awesome house. I love it. It's great here. Night comes. Ooh, honey, we're bailing. I don't care how nice this place is. And that was where apparently Get Out for Jordan Peele's movie came from, was the Eddie Murphy sketch that said, just get out. Like an Amityville Horror. The house wants you to leave, but they don't listen to it. But in this and in Insidious, James Wan did that before this, the logic is, and they literally say that in that one, I thought they didn't in this, but they do this too, which is the bad guy has attached himself to the kid in the Insidious movies and to the whole family in this one. And we do see the black spirit behind them a few different times.
Not even just the family. They even manage to possess...
Or the investigators, Lorraine and Ed.
Because they get their hands on that locket.
Now, Lorraine and Ed, it's interesting that Wilson and Farmiga play not even really the lead characters. They are made the leads, and then Judy, being terrorized in her home by the Annabelle doll and by Bathsheba, who's somehow in the Warren house, which is not even in the same area, it's a bit of a long drive away from where the parents live, is maybe almost like just to give, not even the Warrens really, it's their daughter, but to give them more screen time and more to do. But it almost seems like the two bigger names, Wilson and Farmiga, had scenes like that just because otherwise they maybe wouldn't have wanted to be in the movie. But to me, it seems like Livingston and Taylor should be the leads of the film. And it also seems to me that they could have just easily switched roles. Wilson and Farmiga could have been the parents, and Livingston and Taylor could have been the investigators.
Well, if you were to ask me who does all the heavy lifting in this movie, I would say...
It's the family.
It's the family. Joey King's performance is outstanding. And Lili Taylor...
is great.
She is acting circles around the other three adults.
Well, obviously Wilson especially. Farmiga's the best of those other three. Livingston's fine. Wilson's not. And Farmiga is doing a pretty good job. She also has a lot more to do as the movie goes on. Early on, it seems like, and maybe this is the way they actually did their lectures back in those days, where, yeah, it's fairly even, but it seems like it's really more him that's in charge. And people probably would have looked at it that way. I know that's not cool, but they would have in the 70s. This starts in the 60s. The Annabelle thing's the 60s, and then the main storyline's the 70s, 1971. People would have gone to those lectures and would have said, yeah, the Warrens, but Ed, because he's the guy. Even though she's the one with the clairvoyance and he's just tagging along. He knows what he's doing. I liked, and probably his best sequence in the whole film, is when he finds that hidden passage behind the armoire. He gets out the black light and he finds the footprints and he finds the hole in the armoire. That's the best thing he does in the whole film. It's not like Ed doesn't do anything otherwise, but in the second half of the movie, Lorraine is far more important than he is. She sees the hanging body that he can't see outside on that tree.
But he's the one that has to perform the exorcism for some reason because...
I gotta do it now.
I love that scene. We had a good laugh where they're like, the Vatican won't do it. Why? Because they're not Catholic. What's wrong with these
Screw this
people?
family.
Screw this family. Oh, no. You can die and your souls can go to hell because the children aren't baptized.
You said you like Joey King a lot, and this is Christine. The other actors who played the other four girls... Shanley Caswell is Andrea, she's the oldest, and Kyla Deaver is April, the youngest. I looked them up, and it's been 10 years, so I'm talking about what they look like now. Basically supermodels.
Yeah, they're all beautiful.
They are such beautiful young women now, in their 20s, I guess. But all the actors in the family, well, the female actors are pretty good. We said Livingston is just solid, but that's typical for him. He's a solid actor and has a solid career. He was an adaptation. We covered that before. We didn't cover Office Space, but, of course, that's one of his most, I guess, famous roles. The movie bombed at the box office, but people know it now. Patrick Wilson, I guess we've covered his credits already, so never mind. Vera Farmiga, apart from The Departed, where she's with Leo and Matt as the love interest for both of them, she was nominated for Up in the Air a couple years after that, and then she was a great villain. I didn't keep watching Bates Motel, but she did a good job as the young Norma Bates in the show. I probably should have kept watching. I liked it just fine. Lili Taylor, we'd never covered her before this year, but we did Shortcuts a couple months ago, and she's mostly worked in indies over the years, but like I say, won awards for this performance, and we just raved about her plenty. And the real Lorraine Warren plays an extra in one of the lecture scenes. Obviously, she's a senior citizen now. 2013 when they shot the film. Although I guess actually it was 2012. Would have been the fall of 2012. In North Carolina. It looks like the whole movie was shot in North Carolina. Not the most common location in North Carolina to shoot a movie. And I mentioned the lecture where Lorraine is an extra, the real Lorraine. Carolyn goes to hear them talk, and that's where we find out about the infestation, oppression, and possession thing, which is probably based on what they actually would have said. Oppression is probably the most important one because... Obviously, possession is the scariest one, but the oppression stuff, I guess that's what it comes down to. If something wants to infest your house and try to do these things to you, and you don't believe, then you can't be oppressed.
No, the oppression is what I'm talking about. She broke her down. She just has to be weakened. She doesn't have to believe.
This is easy for me to say because it's never going to happen, realistically speaking. But if I started seeing things like this in our house, especially as the man of the house, I guess I'm the man of the house. I literally am the man of the house. I feel like I'd maybe just go for one of these things. If you're corporeal and I can hurt you, never been a fight in my life, maybe I'm going to fight a demon. And if you're going to kill me, you better take me out because I'm going to eat whatever part of you I can.
You're going to eat the demon? I'm learning things about you today.
That was a cool thing to say to somebody. I might lose this fight, but I might eat a part of you. I'm going to eat a part of you.
Oh, dear.
The guy who's crazy is the one you don't want to fight, even if he's 49 and pudgy. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting, that the oppression thing to me is really the key part of that. My aunt apparently lived in a haunted house, and my mom has talked about how she thinks that my aunt wasn't lying about that. And apparently my aunt would just say late at night when she'd hear things, I think literally chains rattling, she'd say, "Shut up, we all gotta live here, go to sleep." And then nothing would really happen.
The world is full of charlatans, and they infuriate me and make me skeptical when I don't need to be. But I know people who see ghosts. My mother, in particular, she sees ghosts. She tells me about it. And as much as I am a devout atheist, I'll look in your eye and tell you, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in demons. I don't have an explanation for everything that's ever happened. But I just don't believe that that's the explanation. And yet when my mother tells me in detail about the ghosts that she's seen and even occasionally interacted with, I don't think she's lying. And I don't really want an explanation. I don't want to debunk it for her. She isn't distressed by this. I don't feel like she's using it to exploit people in any way. There's no nefarious motive for her to be seeing these things or thinking these things.
Just yesterday, your aunt, on your dad's side, You went to see her because she's not in very good shape right now. And you said to me that she was talking to things that weren't there, talking to people that weren't there.
She's hallucinating, yeah.
Right. So I've always said it's entirely possible that either an insane person or someone who's got a different brain than the rest of us can see or hear things that we can't. Why do animals, dogs especially, and sometimes babies seem to be looking at things or interacting with things, barking or laughing if you're the baby, that we aren't seeing? Maybe they don't see anything either, but maybe they think they do. Doesn't mean they're insane.
I mean, they might be insane.
They could be insane too, yeah. Right. But your aunt is also going through something right now, so...
Her brain is broken. She doesn't normally have hallucinations, but she was having conversations with people who weren't there.
Right. What did you think of them bringing Judy into this storyline? We talked about that a few minutes ago, but Lorraine envisions her daughter floating in front of her on the dock when she's at the Perrin house. The daughter's been really not no part of this movie, because I joked in the intro about how the Forbidden Closet of Mystery doesn't have a very good lock on the door. Ed takes somebody in there to show all these things, the idea being, we'll keep them all here so they can't be, they're all possessed, supposedly. But then they're the ones that say that the objects aren't possessed, it's the conduit to possess you. The girl's talking about that in the very opening, about the Annabelle doll was part of that. So you're really superpowering all these things to be together. But if you're going to put them in this room in your house, right by the front door, I think it is, not far from the daughter's bedroom, that should be triple bolted, man, at least.
And he is in there, and they're like, "We told you not to go in there."
He goes in there with this other guy to show him all these things, but then lock the door behind you. You want the lock on the outside, obviously, for her and for anybody else, and the kind of thing where they cannot get in there.
Can't spirits unlock doors?
But also
obviously, we know they can.
But lock the door behind you when you go in there with somebody when your daughter's home, is what I was going to say.
I mean, like, spirits can unlock doors. Everything about this is such a terrible idea.
Right.
If they believed what they were doing, I don't know about the Warrens. Like I said, I watched some interviews.
They really had a room
with
like this.
Lorraine. I know, because I saw the tour that she gives of the room. And if that woman is lying, she's a better actor than everybody in this movie.
Is it a creepy looking room?
Yeah, it looks terrible. All the objects are corny as you can imagine. The movie makes them look much nicer than they do in real life. And the actual Annabelle doll just looks like
Raggedy Ann, isn't it?
It's Raggedy Ann. I had a doll just like it. But Lorraine Warren, she was very convincing. I didn't read that she was doing for attention, that she was full of BS. She either believes this herself, or she is an absolutely outstanding actress.
Now, do you agree with me, though, that the scenes with the daughter being terrorized by Annabelle and Bathsheba in their own house, which are just her, the grandmother's asleep.
Yeah, I said
Is it
earlier,
there just to give the Warrens more to do in this movie? Because otherwise, it really should just be about the parents, and it would really streamline the story.
I guess so. It could have been adding more dimensions to set up for sequels. It could have been because you have these two lead actors that you need to give them enough to do. It could have been that they thought this would be a good way to raise the stakes. I don't agree that it was. It felt kind of superfluous, and it takes us away from the main story, which has enough drama on its own.
Exactly.
You have 5 children who are in peril. That's all I need.
And
I
the
don't
Warrens
need
care.
another child in peril.
They're not indifferent. They do care.
I'm not saying it's confusing, but it was distracting.
And it's one way to get Wilson to react to anything at all. Because Mr. Wood really doesn't react to anything at all.
You're really coming down hard on Patrick Wilson.
I'm not a fan.
Every once in a while, he gets cast perfectly, but his agent, man...
He barely reacts when his daughter's in danger in this movie. He does a little bit, and he's more freaked out at the very end when he sees the things, because I don't think he's seen demonic possession.
The man is like sentient Melba toast.
At the very end, when Lili Taylor is really truly possessed, he reacts more then, but he's also the one doing the exorcism. And the irony there is, I saw The Pope's Exorcist not long ago, the Russell Crowe movie that came out earlier this year, and I'm going to cover The Exorcist, meaning the Billy Friedkin one, later this month. In both cases, the main exorcist, Max von Sydow and Russell Crowe, say to their assistant, don't react. Just keep on doing what I'm doing. Read the passages in the Bible. That's what will beat this demon. It's not hearing your mother does things in hell, if you remember that movie. Ignore it the best you can. It's not easy, but don't react. Which also plays on what I was saying earlier about how these movies are all about the slow build, and part of it being that's what a movie does, but also because you want people to believe that something's wrong and make them scared. There are a lot of people out there that might have a creaky old weird house, or they might think they see things and just go, oh well. And I don't think the demons can do anything. The ghosts can do anything if they're not empowered.
Yeah, you know, we live in a 100-year-old house. It makes creaky noises.
We also have an attached neighbor, though, too, so it could be her.
Yeah, you're right, because I don't ever hear a noise and think it could be ghosts. I think, oh, it's the ductwork or whatever, who knows. So yeah, maybe a lot of haunted houses are just noisy houses.
They have a scene like that when the Warrens are investigating. It's a little throwaway scene.
A clever way to introduce them.
It's just weird pipes and steam or something.
And they say something like 99% of the time, it's just pipes and steam. And there's a logical explanation for it.
Which is why Ed no-sells what he sees in a lot of this movie, I guess, because he's seen these kinds of things before until he hasn't.
You see them realizing that, oh, no, this time it's for real.
Yeah, the birds attack the house. That's a strange one, too. I guess you could say the whole area is possessed by Bathsheba, because why would the birds dive bomb the house and kill themselves? Yeah, they're becoming weapons to hurt some of the other people, but they're going to die themselves. We see birds hit the house a few times when they're not aiming for anybody, and then they die. So why are they doing that? I guess because the whole area is possessed in a strange way, too. But yeah, Insidious and this, 2 James Wan movies are, you can't just leave and then it's all fine, like Eddie Murphy suggested in his stand-up act. These things are on you, and even if you do move, they do in Insidious, I believe. The family actually moves somewhere else. Rose Byrne and Patrick Wilson go somewhere else, and their son is terrorized by this thing all over again, in a different city, I think, even, not just a different house.
James Wan really was paying attention to those frequently asked questions that people have for horror movies, which is, why don't they just leave? Why would a poltergeist want to just slam doors shut a bunch? It's like they really went through and said, no, we have an explanation. And writing it so that the demon is going to follow you wherever you go keeps the stakes high and stops the audience from rolling their eyes and being like, just leave!
Yeah, if you can't afford to. Although, that also makes sense. I always loved that in the Kevin Bacon movie about 20-some-odd years ago. What was it called again? The end of the story is, spoiler alert on a movie I can't remember the title of. He finds a girl was killed, and she's in the basement of his house. I bring it up because his wife is talking to the family friend or sister or something and says, we can't leave, we can't just bail on all these problems we have because he has to work. He can't just stay home and be sick because he has to work, or we can't afford to live. We see these movies, horror movies or non-horror movies, whatever it is. Your dad's dying, lives halfway around the world. You just go. You're gone for weeks.
Everything.
You can't do that. You have a job if you're a regular person. And that's why they don't leave this house. And it does make a lot of sense. Just like when Carolyn can't leave the house because the body's being affected. Bathsheba's so strong now that you see the bruises manifesting even worse when they try to take her out of the house to be exorcised elsewhere. And I think Bathsheba would have torn her apart, would have broken all the bones if they actually got her out to the front yard or into the car or further. By that point, you're in, so you believe, okay, yeah, they're right. You can't take her out of here. But also, Bathsheba's trying to finish this off now. I guess I better do the exorcism right now, so I actually can buy that.
Yeah, agreed.
Relatively well written by guys who, for the most part, have written a lot of schlock. Chad and Carrie Hayes. They wrote some of the sequels, but most of what they've written is not that impressive. But they did a pretty good job with Wan making this make a lot of sense. I love Wan's gliding camera. I guess steady cam a lot of the time, too. In the climax, we see Drew. Although you never hear what's going on in the basement when you see him, which this would be so loud you'd hear it outside, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
And you never hear what he's doing, which is to call for the daughter who, what is it, Andrea? Anyway, whichever one is trapped, and he finally finds her underneath the kitchen floor. But the camera goes to see what Vera Farmiga's doing, and then it goes up to see what Drew's name is, Shannon Kook, to see what he's doing upstairs. And the camera's dynamic through a lot of this movie. James Wan really knows how to shoot a movie in general, and he certainly knows how to shoot a horror movie, too. And I think that's pretty effective, except it is funny, and I pointed out when it happened to you, is why do we not hear what's happening in the basement? It's so loud.
Oh, yeah.
And it's quiet where he is, and he's not that far away from them.
An old country house. You would hear every footstep, forget the screaming, the banging, and the chair hitting the ceiling.
So I mentioned James Wan did do Saw. We covered that 4 years ago. Insidious, which we're going to watch. We probably won't review it, though. Furious 7, that was a huge hit. Aquaman was a monster hit, and Wilson's in that. I just talked about Chad and Carrie Hayes wrote this. Rob Cowan produced it. There's a rich variety of production credits for him, often with Wan. Tony DeRosa Grund just did a few other things. And then Peter Safran has worked on this series, so a lot of the other Conjuring universe films and other films with James Wan. So obviously there's a lot of loyalty with him, working with these people like Wilson over and over again, but also some of his behind-the-scenes people, including the editor, Kirk Morey. He's always been Wan's editor. John Leonetti shot this, has done a lot of comedy and a lot of horror. Now he's directing films. And I mentioned the composer, Joseph Bashara. His score is very effective. I'm assuming you're going to agree.
Oh, yeah.
He's done many in this series, and he's played at least 2 of the great villains in Insidious and now in this movie. A non-actor does a pretty great job in that scare when he's on top of the armoire and then jumps down. Even just looking at it, because we paused the movie to go to the washroom and I came back before you did, so I looked up a shot online, just a simple still frame of him on top of that armoire leering in this woman makeup, this dead witch makeup. Pretty effective just looking at it straight on. It's like that shot in Exorcist 3 with the giant scissors and the ghost coming out. Just looking at that is freaky. There's a shot you're going to scream so loud and insidious when it happens. And it took me a while to get used to it. The movie is on Netflix, by the way. That's how we saw it, even though it's also on Crave. We had many options to watch this movie. Funny enough, though, the sequel's not on Crave. I don't know why. You'd think that they would be. Because Crave, HBO, usually has Warner Brothers movies, and this is a Warner Brothers production. So the first one, but not the other ones. What'd you think of the look and the cutting and the music?
None of the technicals really blew me away, but they were all very competent. I agree with you. I like the way that Wan moves his camera. He is just great at making a watchable, competent film that moves. There's no sloppiness. There's just a lot of filmmakers out there that don't understand how to make a basic, watchable, entertaining film.
The sound design on this is extraordinary, I think, including the music. And also, let's give some kudos. We don't usually talk about this, but the stunts.
Oh, yeah, we have to talk about the stunts. We were saying this when we were watching it. The stunts are out of this world. This movie is very judicious in the way that it doesn't use too much special effects. It lets the actors and the stunts and the creepiness of the script do a lot of the work. And by the end, in the third act, the special effects are a little bit distracting, a little bit corny, but tons of practical effects, and they are tremendously effective.
Yeah, the scene where Lili Taylor falls down the stairs in the basement. Whoever did that stunt, man or woman, kudos to you, because that was very convincing. And that person knows what they're doing, not to get hurt doing that. And then when Vera Farmiga falls through the little section behind the armoire and goes into the basement, and that's what leads, I think, to the sequence where she sees the woman that she made me do it. And then the great scare with the music box when she pulls the music box down. I think the way that all led up, it is actually, as I recall, is that she fell through, and she should have been badly hurt from that. Just like I'm going to talk about next week, Jamie Lee Curtis takes a fall, well, the stunt woman, but her character takes a fall that should have really hurt her in Halloween. But it's a horror movie, and you're in the middle of the story. You don't really dwell on it too much. What happens next? Well, apart from the sequels and spin-offs, what should have happened next was that none of the people involved were so cavalier that the horror was really over. Carolyn puked out the evil, yes, but that's that. She came close to killing her daughter. She was possessed and she's not anymore, yes, but we're just going to forget about all that? And will any of these 6 girls, the 5 Perrin kids and Judy Warren, ever recover from things they saw? I know they're based on real people, and I saw some stuff about how they either did see some of these things or they didn't or whatever. It wasn't like their lives were ruined, but the way this story is told, these 6 characters in this real-life story, but these 6 actresses playing these characters should have been messed up forever from what they see.
Yeah.
Never mind, I assume Judy going through it again because her parents are in at least, I guess there's 2 other sequels now. I think there's been 3 Conjuring movies. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. Wilson and Farmiga were in that again. Okay then, The Conjuring, pretty good scary movie to start Scary Movie Month. Your last thoughts on it?
I am both excited and dreading Conjuring 2 and Insidious.
Yes. If I didn't say this already, I only gave this movie 2 stars when I saw it in 2013. I didn't see it in the theater, which I thought maybe I had, but according to my notes, I didn't. I capitalized movies I've seen in the theater.
Were you mad because it actually did manage to scare you? Most movies do not scare you.
It didn't really so much scare me in the moment. It made my skin crawl a lot, though. And it stuck with me. You go in the basement and you have that self-consciousness. Is something watching me? That's what horror movies are for, to make you feel self-conscious and afraid of something that's not really logical. Although this is more logical than some of the movies I'm going to cover later this month. An indestructible serial killer that can go through anything and keep on coming back and killing someone who has nothing to do with anything. Not that these people are guilty of anything either, but they dare to be in this house. So I'm going to curse you because you're here, and I want the conduit of Carolyn to kill again. So yeah, 3 stars for The Conjuring. Definitely more than I would have given it the first time. The next 2 horror pictures that will be discussed on this channel will be done by me alone. Bev has been taking the holiday Mondays off for several months now, and since Monday the 9th is the Canadian Thanksgiving, I'll be monologuing about a classic that she doesn't like that much anyway, so it's probably wise that I do talk about it on my own. It's Halloween. I reviewed Rob Zombie's take on Michael Myers and Laurie Strode last year. Now it's way past time for me to get into what John Carpenter did when he established the template for the modern slasher flick. And then the show that goes up that Friday is going to be, well, look at the date and see if you can figure it out. Incidentally, since I promoted this in the Ugetsu episode, I decided to do my solo review of The Exorcist later in the month because it didn't make a lot of sense to do 2 demonic possession movies in a row because it was going to be Conjuring, Exorcist, but now Exorcist is on the 20th and Halloween is on the 9th. Now, since we saved coming attractions trivia questions for episodes we do together, well, the next one of those will be on October 16th. We'll be tackling Jordan Peele's 3rd horror flick, Nope. The coming attractions trivia for Nope. Bev will probably get this one right away, but our listeners might not know. Nope is the title of the movie, partly because Daniel Kaluuya says that at least once. Nope, 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 nope. But also, some have said it's an acronym. So what does N-O-P-E stand for?
So for the answer to that question, check out our podcast 2 weeks from now about Nope. You obviously already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. Is there a movie you'd like to hear us cover? Well, you can make a recommendation by leaving us a review, and while you're there, rate us as well. It helps people find us. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. Or you can reach us by email, haveyoueverseenpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find our podcast on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
Want to move to the country, Bev? Good things always happen out in the middle of nowhere in a big country house. Good things. Nothing ever happens bad out there.
And cut.
Ooh.